Welcome to a ride on the outside. MMA is full of people on the inside, but what about the ones that watch from beyond? Welcome to the MMA Outsiders with Tom Albano and Zain Bando on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network.
And welcome everybody to another edition of the MMA Outsiders here on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. I'm Tom Albano, that is Zain Bando. Special Wednesday afternoon edition of the MMA Outsiders. Scheduling issues on the network end has forced a little shake around, but here we are. We've got UFC 305 this weekend, really heavily anticipated title fight, although some would say the hype behind the fight that it seemed like it would have about a year ago has kind of dissipated in Israel Adesanya, considering Israel Adesanya rather lost the middleweight championship at one point, has been away for a year. All the controversy with Sean Strickland and where he fits into the title picture. Plus, we've got headlines upon headlines upon headlines this week.
Yeah, we have headlines upon headlines aplenty this week, and there's even going to be an update on Sean Strickland, which I'm excited to tell you about because I don't think you know about the update with Strickland yet. But before we get into all of that and so much more, we would just like to remind you all to please like and subscribe. This is very important as we are slowly but surely approaching 1,000 subscribers. So the more that you help us out on that front, the more that it'll keep finding the algorithm and the more that both Tom and myself can continue to grow, as well as the show. Is after today, we'll only have a couple more episodes until the big 100. So we're slowly but surely approaching that 100 episode mark, just past the 2-year anniversary. So we'd greatly appreciate all your support. Again, you can go to youtube.com/ETV Network to find out all of that and so much more. You can also go to etvpodcast.com for more information about the network, including weekly UFC blogs from Brett Cagle, who you might know as the co-host of Puncher's Chance, as well as some other content across other sports from some of our other contributors on the NFL front and so much more. So if you want the latest information in news and sports, you can go there. You can check us out there. And of course, you could follow the network across social media at ETP Network.
And of course, we'd be remiss if we did not mention that the MMA Outsiders and everything else here at the Empty the Bench Podcast Network is presented by Playback. Watching sports is more fun with others, but we spend too much of our time watching alone. Playback is a virtual space where communities can stream live sports together with everyone perfectly synced up. Creators can hop on stage, deliver their own play-by-play analysis and commentary, and invite viewers up for Q&A. Playback makes watching sports fully interactive and a social experience. From playing fantasy sports, repping your favorite players and teams, and watching with the commentators and communities you care about. Win or lose, sports are best enjoyed together. Join our community by going to playback.tv/ETV Network to find out more, including our live stream schedule. Zain and I will be on the air on Playback. I think the plan is Thursday morning for Fight Study. I want to say maybe 11:30-ish.
That sounds right. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so around that time, we'll have a final time go out on social media, but the plan is somewhere around 11:30. We will be live on Playback, playback.tv/ETV Network again. Fight Study. We'll watch a couple of Dricus du Plessis fights. We'll watch a couple of Israel Adesanya fights and talk about what they need to bring to the table when it comes to UFC 305 and their main event, middleweight championship match. Speaking of, let's jump right into that as our top story, of course, preview for UFC 305. Our friends over at Puncher's Chance are going to go more in depth on the main card, more in depth on the prelims. Like I said, that's because this is a news-based show and we got a lot of news that we got to go through. So we'll stick with some of the bigger fights with UFC 305, but none bigger than the heated middleweight championship fight between Dricus du Plessis, Israel Adesanya. Of course, du Plessis coming on the scene just a couple of years ago, one of the best fighters coming out of South Africa, and ends up knocking out Robert Whittaker last year to earn a title shot. And then, of course, everything gets thrown into a scramble with the UFC 293 scheduling controversy. Sean Strickland pulling off one of the greatest upsets in UFC, in MMA history, let alone UFC history. And then Sean Strickland, of course, losing the championship to Dricus du Plessis. Du Plessis slipping into the title picture again after Adesanya. Well, this is his first fight back in a year. He hasn't fought since the loss to Strickland. a lot of tension between these two, a lot of, well, let's say it, racial-based and country-based tension. Both of
Lots
these
of it.
guys,
Yep.
both of these guys claiming to be the real African champion. Obviously, Israel Adesanya has his Nigerian roots. Dricus du Plessis, born and raised in South Africa, was a champion in EFC, the South Africa promotion, obviously not the Eagle FC promotion. So a lot, these two have quite the tension. You think back to the UFC 290 after du Plessis knocked out Whitaker and the tension in the cage. And it seemed like Israel Adesanya said, a real African champion seemingly trying to lure Dricus into saying a certain racial slur that should never be uttered. And basically, that's the level that we're at. But it seems like people aren't as hyped so much for this fight anymore. And I don't know if it's because of what Sean Strickland has managed to do ever since upsetting Israel Adesanya for the title. I don't know if it's because it's been a year since the fight, and obviously with all those happenings in the middleweight title scene, that this fight has lost a little bit of luster. I don't know if it's to do with the controversy, because some people still feel that Strickland beat du Plessis at 297 in January. I don't know what it is. I mean, I'm excited for the fight. I love Dricus. I love Izzy. I want to see this fight. Or by the way, actually, fourth reason came to my head, or if it's just that we've kind of talked about this. Outside of maybe Alex Ferreira's performance and outside of maybe the Saudi Arabia card and the Abu Dhabi card, the UFC summer has just been, it's fallen flat.
Yeah, and just to clarify for any of you that are confused, these two were supposed to fight a year ago in September, but an injury on the du Plessis side halted those plans, which is why the fight is now taking place when it is, and given everything that happened, this was the fight the UFC felt that had to be made, and this is how they're going about it. Before I even get into more of my analysis on the fight, and this is what I was hinting at just a couple of minutes ago.
Did they confirm Strickland's getting winner?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Fair enough. Very fair enough. Especially because now Whitaker's going to be facing Chimaev again.
Yep.
So that's the only decision at this point to make, and then whoever wins between Whitaker and Chimaev probably gets the winner of Strickland versus whoever comes out on top here. That's what
exactly. So yeah, that's what I was going to get into in terms of the news stakes side of this. Now I can get into the actual fight itself. I'm going to have to disagree with you. I still think the fight is pretty palpable over this fight. I mean, I've gone across a bunch of different MMA based Instagram pages. It seems like all the ones that are based in Australia are jacked for this fight. People are billing it as, Australia's unofficial Super Bowl, even though we're not talking about football, we're talking about professional fighting. People are billing this as one of the biggest sporting events in all of Australia. So I think the hype is still very much there, and it may not be as big as what it was a year ago, just simply because you don't have it immediately right after that in-cage banter that took place 8 weeks prior. So maybe that's the only lackluster drop from this fight. But this fight is awesome. Stylistically, these two match up very well. Stylistically, these two are finishers. They both like to talk. They know how to sell fights. And we may have not gotten all the big fights this summer that we were hoping for, but assuming that nothing catastrophic happens within the next 72 to 84 hours, hopefully this fight still remains intact, and I think it'll deliver. And then some. I do think that these are the two best middleweights in the world, and I completely disagree. I completely disagree with people when they say when the retractors say that Adesanya does not deserve another shot at getting his middleweight championship back. People seem to instantly discredit the fact that he dominated the division from 2019 to the middle of 2023. I feel like people instantly forgot that as soon as Strickland fought du Plessis, and I feel like he's going to go out there to try to exact his revenge to show that he's always been the true champion and that the Strickland fight was a fluke. And I think that there's more to prove on the Adesanya side than there is the du Plessis side, just because Adesanya has the legacy factor and du Plessis doesn't yet. So
Zain, I 100% agree with you. Which, by the way, don't forget that also Israel Adesanya is technically a two-time middleweight champion because he had the one loss to Alex Pereira, again, in a fight that he was actually winning for all 4 rounds, got
That's
knocked
true.
out, and then managed to, when they had the rematch, knock out Alex Pereira, which is something he hadn't done in 3 fights across 2 different MMA disciplines. That was the 4th time total that they were facing off.
That's true, and something else to add to that too. If he were to win, he would join a rare list of only 3 UFC fighters to win the same belt on 2 different occasions across UFC history, which is a rare thing to do 2 or more times specifically. So he'd be joining a company in that regard. I'm pretty sure it's Randy Couture and Alex Pereira, if I'm mistaken, but it's still a very rare feat. So
yeah, no, very rare feat indeed. So, and honestly, Adesanya, I think, kind of needed the time off because he obviously lost to Jan Blachowicz when he tried to step up to light heavyweight in 2021. He had that loss to Pereira, lost in pretty one-handed fashion to Strickland. He was kind of going on a little downward trend, and he needed a little composure, so, a little time to recompose and reconfigure himself. But I completely agree with you, Zan, in that I think there's a lot of pressure right now on Israel Adesanya with this fight. I think Dricus, despite Dricus being the champion, Israel Adesanya has the one who is the one who has a lot more to lose right now, considering that he's been away for a year, considering that, as I just mentioned, his track record, as of late in terms of recent fights, hasn't been the greatest. So we're looking at this. I think Israel Adesanya definitely has the awkward fighting style, is definitely going to be the slicker of the fighters. But at the same time, I feel like Dricus du Plessis and his weakness that we talked about when previewing 297 at the start of the year, Zan, about his pacing, about going a full 5 rounds, I think he kind of erased a little bit of that by the fact that he managed to go a full 5 competitive rounds with Sean Strickland. Now, granted, I think Israel Adesanya and Sean Strickland's track records are very different if you look at their opponent history, but I think Israel Adesanya still has some claim to, not completely with the UFC middleweight championship, but he definitely has the stronger track record. So for du Plessis to show he is the true king of the division, more than the win against Strickland, more than a potential rematch win against Strickland, he needs to beat Israel Adesanya, recent record or recent 1-year break aside. I think Dricus is going to match Israel Adesanya's aggression. Like I said, I think his pacing is probably going to be different for this. I think his pacing is going to be a little better. I definitely think he's going to still come out with some aggression within the early stages of the fight. And if I'm Israel Adesanya, I better win. I better win 2 of the first 3 rounds.
Yeah, so I mean, with all that being said, I'm just going to go right into my prediction. I'm going to ride with what Alexander Volkanovski said in one of his most recent YouTube videos. He thinks that this year off, and I tend to agree with him, he thinks this year off is going to be a huge benefit to Adesanya because he realizes that he can't make the same mistake twice. He was put in this exact scenario. It wasn't in Perth a year ago. It was in Sydney, Australia, from what I recall, when he fought Strickland, and Volkanovski said that he thinks that Adesanya won't make the same mistakes twice. And I think the way to beat du Plessis is to frustrate him in ways that he's never been frustrated before. I don't think du Plessis has fought a striker in his entire career thus far that's as good and as technical as Adesanya. When Adesanya is 100%, and when Adesanya looks like one of the scariest fighters in the world, there's no question about it that he rules the middleweight division. So I feel like, similarly to you, if he can win the first couple of rounds and get a late second round, early third round finish, he'll have done his job. But the longer the fight goes, the longer it favors du Plessis. But I do think the year of will play a huge factor in this fight, and considering the fact that that du Plessis, he just a couple of months ago had a 5-round war, and even though January to August, it's sort of a bit of a longer time off. A 25-minute fight is still a 25-minute fight, and if you can't sustain of longevity, I think it's going to smell bad news. So I actually like Adesanya to win this fight by third on TKO and reclaim his UFC middleweight championship. And I know that you've been a Duplessis fan for a long time. I know that you correctly predicted him to beat Strickland, as did I. But I just feel like him fighting Adesanya at this stage in Adesanya's career, when he's trying to put a stamp on one of the greatest middleweight of all time, I just don't see how he can lose. And to add to the fact that Adesanya is 4-3 in his last 7, people forget that. So,
yeah, Israel. That's why I talked about the concerning recent track record about Adesanya being 4-3 in his last 7. Considering, as you mentioned, this long history I've had with Duplessis, I want to go your route and pick Adesanya, but I can't do it. I have to ride the Duplessis. I've ridden the train this whole time. I can't do it until the wheels fall off. So I'm gonna go flip the other way. I'm gonna say Duplessis gets the 3rd round knockout.
Wow, so you actually think Duplessis finishes Izzy? You see, I think
only because I don't think Duplessis can get a decision win. I think the decision. Decision.
See, I don't agree with you. I think the only way Duplessis he can beat Adesanya is by decision.
In Australia?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
You don't think if it goes to the scorecards that the crowd's going to weigh into the judges' fact? It shouldn't, but we know how this works.
If it's a close fight, yeah, but if it's a clear unanimous decision, I don't see how the crowd plays a factor into it at all. But I could be wrong about that.
I want to hope that. So I'm going to go with Duplessis. I think it would be a safer than sorry bet that he needs to finish Adesanya. I would rather him be safe than sorry for a win here. Now, and the other thing is, and I feel like I said, this is a prove me performance for Adesanya. Been away. It's been away a year. He's, like you said, is only 4-3 in his last 7 fights. He needs to come out and show that he can still hang with the best of this division. Because what if it is a one-sided loss for him? What if Duplessis does finish him? What's that going to say about middleweight?
Well, then the question would become: does Adesanya think about the R word creeping into his head all of a sudden?
Well,
that would be another side of the equation. Would it not? Because who else would Adesanya fight with the loss to DDP? He'd have to work his way up all over again.
Yeah, and I don't know if he would do that at middleweight or if he would try to move up a weight class like he's done before when he tried to challenge Jan Blachowicz. Which, by the way, now that I'm thinking about it, I don't know where Strickland fits into this because, I mean, we had the Dana report that you mentioned, but we do have a couple of well-known MMA media members who are speculating potentially if Israel Adesanya wins this fight about if the UFC will try to pull strings, get him to jump up again for a champ versus champ fight against his old rival in Ferreira.
And I don't think you could name me a single MMA fan on the planet who wouldn't want to see that again. So,
especially at a different weight class.
Right. Exactly. And considering how good the first 2 fights were. So
I've got a feeling, even though Strickland is there, I don't know. Especially, you know, like I've talked about, Zain, if Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler does not happen in December, on December 7th, because now it seems like, as you told me off air, now there was a report out there on the social media that apparently December 14th is going to be a fight night card. We'll talk about the location factor in a little bit because it relates to another news story.
Yep.
So it looks like December 7th is the date. So now comes the question. If, you know, I'm not even going to say it as a question because I've been preaching it for the last few weeks. If Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler does not happen December 7th, you got to have somebody like an Alex Pereira ready on standby for a fight.
100%. Otherwise, you're going to run into a Sydney situation all over again. That's what it's going to be.
If they go, Zain, and I'll take the banner off here because big take here, but obviously not related to this fight. If they book UFC 310 like they did 246, and they put all their eggs in the Conor versus Chandler basket, and the fight falls off again, you might have to consider cancellation of the card.
Yeah, you might. Although that would make for a financial disaster, considering that considering that T-Mobile owes the UFC 4 pay-per-views a year, and they won't even get 4 this year because of the Sphere fight. So they'd even be in a worse conundrum if that happened. So
they gotta have a plan B, and I would trust that somebody like Dana is not stupid. Dana has talked with Conor McGregor before. He has dealt with Conor McGregor plenty of times now. He has to have a plan B ready.
Oh, for sure. And hearing, the news about what Michael Chandler said, that he's looking at potentially every single option now. The percentage is, how I like to play my weekly update game on my own personal show. My personal percentage meter has dwindled in the last 48 to 72 hours. So, yeah.
Well, Arman Tsarukyan has, we didn't have the time for it, but Arman Tsarukyan has come out and said, he is still looking to do PSA and maybe do an interim title fight. So I know Chandler hasn't fought in a while, he's coming off a loss, but if you're talking desperation, Plan Z, Code Red emergency button disaster for December, I mean, it's there.
Yeah, you could do Arman versus Chandler or Arman versus Dustin Poirier.
For an interim title, yeah.
Either or. But we definitely dragged this on a little bit too long. You want to move on to the co-main event now?
Yeah, let's quickly. We got a couple more fights because I do want to go over the co-main event, but we do talk about the lightweight title scene next. But let's focus here. Kai Kara-France, Steve Erceg.
Huge fight.
Steve Erceg, I mean, is coming off of a loss to Alex Pantoja in May. It was a clear loss. Erceg, could have beaten Pantoja in that fight, but made a really bad fight IQ decision in that fight in the 5th round that cost him. Pantoja came out afterwards and said he believes Steve Erceg will be flyweight champion of the UFC within the next few years. And then Kai Kara-France, I mean, it is an Australia card, so it's just like an Izzy or a Whitaker. You got to have KKF on there. And KKF, Zain, is a long-time case of the bridesmaid, never the bride. He has come very close to getting a title shot, and he has continued to fall short. I would think if KKF got past Erceg here, he would finally get a title shot at some point, considering what could happen with Pantoja next, considering, they're booking Tyra versus Royval, whatever's going to happen with Albazi, or the rumor now, as Punch's Chance is going to talk about later today, Kaya Sakura could get a title shot in this first fight. So this has title implications.
Oh, it's a title implications for sure. And, you could argue that this is a quick turnaround for Steve Erceg, considering that he just fought Alexandre Pantoja in Brazil. So we're neither asking him to, neither asking him to go home, essentially. I was going to say enemy territory again, but that doesn't make sense. This fight's taking place in his home country, but I think whoever can outlast the other in a 15-minute slugfest is going to be the one that wins this fight, because I think even though their resumes are slightly different than one another, I feel like their track record is one where is one where it could be all at slugfest, and they actually do share some common opponents. So well, I just feel like this fight is the makings to be a potential fight of the night, and this is the makings to be a potential fight of the year that wasn't for a championship. What do you think?
Yeah, no, this is going to be, like you said, I think this is going to be a 3-round slugfest. I think these two are just going to lay it into one another for 15 minutes. It's going to be interesting to see who has the power, who has the capability, the chin, if you want to go that far, to last through, who can land the damaging shots. I'm gonna lean towards Erceg, because Erceg is just recently fought for the title. Like I said, he nearly beat Pantoja for the title. Kai Kara-France is, we call Whitaker and Holloway the quadruple A fighter. I think Kai Kara-France is a 3-star fighter. He always gets to the doorstep, but he can never get the title shot, because every time the lights go up and the game is on, he always, for some reason, falls short. And unfortunately for him, even in his home country, I see that continuing on.
Yeah, I like with Usyk too. I think it's going to be a close split decision, but it'll be a good fight though.
Yeah, it should be good. All right, so we're talking
And
about
also too, assuming that they go through with these flyweight plans, I would say have the winner of this fight on standby in case the rumored Pantoja Kaya Sakura fight doesn't happen. If one of these two guys takes no damage, it would make logical sense in my opinion. So
and then as long as Tyra gets past Royval, he would be in the wings basically for the winner of that fight.
that's exactly what I'm thinking. Either which way. If you'd rather have Tyra go first or these two go first, either which way. If they have some sort of a flyweight backup plan, it would make sense. So
absolutely. We talked about the flyweight title scene though, but we just talked about the lightweight title scene, Zan, and this is where things could get interesting.
This is a potential wild card fight. You'd probably agree with that.
Yes, because like I mentioned a couple weeks ago, like kind of hinted at already, the lightweight title scene, considering the injury to Islam, everybody in the top 5, maybe even the top 6 or 7 is coming off of a loss, except for one man, Matus Gamrot. And the easy thing to do would be to make Gamrot Armin for an interim title. Unfortunately, in the UFC's, unfortunate booking situation, they managed to book Gamrot for this card against Dan Hooker. So the question at this point is, 1, does Gamrot get past Dan Hooker? And 2, if he does, is he well enough that, going back to that scenario we talked about, if whatever reason something towards the end of the year falls off, like the way the whole second half of the UFC calendar year has been going, like let's say a Conor Chandler, could there be the potential that they run Armin versus Gamrot if Gamrot wins here?
100%. And even though it may not be, the ticket drawing holy what fight,
it's a main event.
It's a main event. It's a fight that probably would need to happen at some point down the road. And obviously a bunch of these guys have history with each other, so it would only make sense. To me, I think this is a tough spot for Hooker. I just simply think that Gamrot's the better fighter at this point, and he has all the momentum. I would love to be proven wrong. Hopefully, Hooker can win in front of his people, but I just think that Gamrot is too good, and his wrestling will be too much. What do you think?
Yeah, Gamrot's wrestling is going to be too much. I mean, Hooker has been managed, he has managed to compete with some of the best at lightweight, but, it hasn't really translated to complete success. And his recent results, Sam, has me a little bit worried that maybe his better days and his opportunities to get, completely in that title scene may be behind him. So I feel like this is a bit of a must win for Hooker, but like you said, considering the grappling and pressure that Gamrot brings into his fights, I don't know if that's something Hooker can handle. I'm going to ride with Gamrot by decision.
Okay, so we're both on the same wavelength here, and you'd probably agree the only way Hooker can beat Gamrot is if he knocks him out.
Knocks him out, yeah.
Yeah. Which, by the way, given how crazy some of these fights have been, where you least expect a crazy outcome, this could be one of them. You never know. So
absolutely. Now, as I mentioned, we're just going to focus on those 3 fights, but there is another card this weekend, Zan. On Friday night, the PFL is in Hollywood, not Hollywood, California, Hollywood, Florida, the Hard Rock. We're going to start with the light heavyweight semifinals. You got your buddy, Impa Kasaganai, taking on Josh Silveira in a rematch of last year's light heavyweight championship bout. And then you've got Rob Wilkinson. Big rematch. And then on the other side, you have Rob Wilkinson, another former PFL light heavyweight champion, taking on one of the guys that you mentioned the word wildcard, one of the guys that has come out of nowhere in Dovlitzan Yakshimuradov.
Who you've been hyping up this entire season.
I think he's so talented. He is talented.
No, for sure. I mean, you couldn't ask for 2 better fights to top the Hollywood card. I may be a little biased, but when the playoff cards first came out, this was the one that I was the most excited about. I'm sure you have similar feelings as well. I'm gonna kind of pose these questions to you, since you're a little bit more of the PFL expert than I am. But could you see Kasaganai versus Silveira Part 2, or a Part 3, rather go any differently in the first two times that these guys fought, or do you think, or do you think it'll be a very, very similar story?
I think Silveira has definitely learned from that first fight. I definitely think I definitely think he's going to try and land more power shots. I think he is going to try to find ways to get around Impa's, limbs and cut off some of his reach, cut off the cage. That said, I think, Zan, what we have seen from Impa, over the last year plus has been something ridiculous. It has been something amazing. And even though he came up short against Johnny Eblen in February, I think he picked up more from that. And he has looked even better in his regular season this year after losing that fight to Eblen, who is probably the best middleweight outside of the UFC.
Yeah, and a lot of people argue that, had Kasaga and I had a few more seconds when he rocked him late, that we could be talking about an entirely different story. So,
so I'm going to think, I think this will be a closer fight. I think this one goes the distance again. I still am going to go with Impa here.
Yeah, I'm going to take Impa too, but I'm going to take him by a late third round TKO. I think that Silveira adjusts his game plan a little bit. I actually think he puts Impa in positions Impa hasn't been in a couple years, but it's one of those things where I think Silveira will more than likely use up a lot of his energy, and by round 3 he'll be so gassed that he won't be able to do anything.
I was going to say, I think Silveira will use some of his aggression in the first round to take that and force Impa's back against the wall. But as you kind of alluded, when we've seen Impa with his back against the wall, sometimes magic happens with him.
No, for sure, and you could argue that his semifinal fight showed a lot of that similar stuff too, just considering the way he won and everything else. So, but yeah, this would definitely be a very interesting fight, and definitely the right placing to make this one the main event, considering that these two are so familiar with one another. It's nice to see that Rob Wilkinson is still in the mix for a PFL light heavyweight title, just considering that he's been in the sport a long time. But the opponent that he's fighting, I think, has been one of the biggest dark horses outside of the UFC, and I'm sure you'd more than likely agree with that.
You just said it before, Zan. I have been hyping this guy up basically all season. I have been on his, not as so much the Dricus du Plessis hype train, but I have been on Dovwood's hype train, his Sambo style and what he's done, which, by the way, even though a Sambo fighter coming out of, let me double check here, actually. Let me double check. Turkmenistan. Even though he's coming out of there, I had to double check, make sure I got the country right. This is an American Top Team product, and I think a Sambo base plus the American Top Team experience, one of the best gyms right now with MMA. Zan, I think whoever comes out on Impa versus Silveira might be in a little bit of trouble, because even against the former PFL champion, as you were kind of suspecting, I'm picking Dove. I think Dove will get a win here over a former PFL champion Wilkinson.
Yeah. I mean, given how crazy Jesus Pinedo's run is in 2023, Dove could definitely have a similar run in his own division. And yeah, I'm going to take him too, but this time I'm going to say that he actually finishes Rob Wilkinson, and it's actually going to be a shocking first round TKO.
You're going with a first round T. Well, honestly, Zan, you look at his most recent fights, it's either a decision or a first round finish.
That's the exact reason why I'm winning that way, is because it can only be one of two ways.
One of two ways. So I'm gonna go the other way. I'm gonna go with a decision.
Okay.
I would not be surprised though if Dove manages to get it done a quick of devastating fashion as that. So we're in agreement that Impa versus Dove is going to be our championship fight here.
Just very quickly before we move on, because I know we don't have banners for some of the other fights, but is there one fight that people should be looking forward to that maybe isn't getting the shine that it deserves?
Hold on, we got the lightweight title scene we got to talk about, because I think this bracket's honestly even better. Brent Primus versus Clay Collard. Like you talked about Impa Silveira being the main event, as it should. This would also could have been a potential main event. You got Brent Primus former Bellator champion, beat Michael Chandler for it, regardless, of the fact that it happened versus injury, versus Clay Collard, who the PFL has been, well, he's been a star of the PFLs. He's
Yeah,
been a face of the PFLs, even though he hasn't won a championship.
Yeah, and they promoted the heck out of him too, just given how emotional his story is. And even though he's not the most emotional interview, he's a very stoic interview, given that I've only spoken to him one-on-one once. He's a very stoic person when he talks, but when he's in the smart cage, he becomes a totally different person. And he's gonna need it against Primus because these two are like mirror images of each other, and this fight should be awesome. So
yeah, I've talked to Clay Collard before too, a few years ago, and he, like you said, very stoic, stoic. And with OAM's retirement, they felt like, I think people felt, Zan, that Clay Collard could have had his best chance here in this PFL season. But Brent Primus and his wrestling might just end up being a really tough fight for Collard. I think this is going to be a typical striker versus grappler matchup, and I might lean towards Primus's experience here. So it sounds silly to keep picking the number one seeds, but they're number one seed. It seems like this year's number one seeds for the PFLs are number one seeds for a reason, given Dennis Goltsov and Dakota Ditcheva last week,
right.
Impa this year, and I mean on the light heavyweight scene, and now Brent Primus here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think between these two fights, this Primus Collard fight is a coin flip. If I'm actually gonna disagree with you, and I think that Collard's inspirational run continues for at least one more fight. I think it's a very close split decision, but it has the chance to be one of the best PFL fights of the year, and I think it will. And I think it will do it either which way. I'm okay with whoever wins this fight. I just think that Collard, based on the last time I spoke to him, and just the way he was talking about like how badly he wants everything and how badly he wants the $1 million prize to make sure that his family's set for life. I believe him, and I'm going to pick him. But I can say this though: whoever makes the first mistake and potentially the last mistake is going to lose the fight. So these two better be careful. That's what I think.
And then on the other side, you actually got a Grappler's Paradise matchup, Rabadanov and Dufort. I'm going to lean toward Rabadanov, though. I think his Sambo is going to beat out the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu of Dufort.
Same here.
And I am a little concerned about Dufort. Like, he definitely earned his spot, but the loss against Piccolotti does bring up a little bit of concern, even though it was a split decision. Maybe a little controversial there. But, Godzi, I mean, he has run through, between Bellator and PFL as of late, Zan, he's run through Bobby King, Koji Takeda, Peter Bust, Solomon Renfro, and Elvin Espinoza.
Yeah, with his that's two of his most impressive wins, and one of them more than likely being Bobby King, which I'm sure you probably agree with. All of those wins were very, very impressive. You can't point to a single performance and say, "Oh, that was bad. He didn't look good."
And then, of course, if you want to go to the training partner, prestige of things, Dufort is the training partner of OAM, but Godzi is one of those guys, who comes from the school of the Nurmagomedovs, and you know how tough it is to take on somebody from that school.
Yeah, and you know how hard it is to pick against anybody with the lineage. Have you noticed in the history of the show how few times I picked against anybody that's related, or am I related
Same.
to zeros? Oh, it's not going to start. It's not going to start this week. So,
all right, let's go now over to.
You like him by decision, though? I never.
Yeah, he's been on a decision. He's been on a decision streak. I like him by decision. Just some other things, because you mentioned it before. Biagio Ali Walsh competes in his. I think this is his second pro fight to start off the main card. He's taking on a guy, Brian Stapleton. Danny Sabatello on the early card, taking on Lazaro Dayron. So if you haven't, if PFL people who weren't familiar with Bellator, if you have not seen Danny Sabatello and you have not heard him on the mic, you might be in for something on Friday.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
And then
Absolutely.
actually, Espinosa is in action on the early card too, taking on Mads Burnell in a fight
It's
I'm
solid.
probably looking forward to.
It's a solid card. It's a very solid card.
Mm-hmm.
And a bit of a later start time too, 6:30 Eastern start. So
Yeah, I'd say the PFL has been cooking with these playoff cards.
mm-hmm.
Let's get into the news. So Jon Jones once again. So is he gonna fight? Is he not gonna fight? What's going on with MSG? It was looking like November 16th. We'll talk about why with the Apex in a second. But now Zan just released the New York Knicks schedule. The Knicks are going to be hosting an NBA Cup game on the 15th. So if they want to do the weigh-ins, they're going to have to go to the theater at the Garden. So November is looking completely chaotic. And then let's just add one more thing on top of that. Jon Jones replying to some fan on Twitter and basically saying, "Oh, I'm going to be 37 and retired." And I had to double check his age. Oh, he's 37 now. And now once again, the rumors are starting to, you got on me a little bit, but now once again, here he is teasing that he may not fight Aspinall. He may lay the gloves down after facing Stipe at the Garden.
Yeah, which if that happens, I'm gonna have to publicly apologize to you on here because you would look like the genius and I would look like the idiot. I'm the one. No, but
is it a fight? Is it a fight that should happen, Zan? Yes, absolutely. But I just don't know because I've talked about it. Jones taking on, the GOAT taking on the greatest heavyweight of all time in a building, like I say, Stipe has never fought in. Jones, who was born in New York, has never fought in. It would I just can't see, facing somebody. Him like this. That said, I don't know if you caught what I said to Pat last week, Zan, but I said if Jon Jones, I think still Jon Jones is willing to fight Aspinall more on a replacement notice, like if Stipe falls out. I think if Jones falls out again and they put Aspinall in, I think Stipe pulls out too.
I do too, which means at that point you have to vacate the heavyweight title. Then it would either have to be vacant or you would elevate Aspinall to undisputed heavyweight champion, and kind of like what I alluded to a couple weeks ago, we're back in the situation to where maybe you give the winner of Gane Volkov to the title shot instead. So
on like what would that be now at this point? 3 weeks notice?
Yeah.
That it would be insane. Plus, if neither of them are ready, you risk Aspinall Blades 3, and I don't know what if we want to see that after a 60-second knockout. Granted, you would probably want to see another Chicago UFC champion.
No, I would. Even though based on merit and based on if we're going on the pure form of the rankings, it would make no sense. But
right.
Yeah, absolutely. So my whole thought on this thing is that the heavyweight division's been a chaotic mess. Let's be honest. The heavyweight division's been a chaotic mess for 4 years. It's been a chaotic mess ever since it became the champion, even though it's entirely not his fault. It is what it is. But when you're dealing with who Dana White claims is the pound for pound best fighter in the world, which I agree with him to some extent that when active he is the pound for pound best fighter in the world, but people seem to forget that he has fought in over a year, which just
Dana White seems to forget that.
It blows me away.
I've got a feeling we're gonna just replace this episode of MMA Outsiders with a whole 1 hour looped rant of Dana going on about why Jon Jones is the greatest UFC fighter of all time, pound for pound.
No, seriously. I guess, do you think do you think that Jones Miocic happens? Even though I've asked you this before, it was over a year ago when I asked you, so now I'm looking for an update. Do you think that Jones Miocic happens, and if not, what do you think happens to the status of the UFC heavyweight title? And do you think the UFC implements something that we're not expecting? What do you think?
I'm going to say yes, but they got to announce the fight soon. It's already August 13th.
Yeah,
or
August
14th.
13th at the time that
14th.
13th at the time that we're recording this. 14th is when it's going to air. But yeah, I agree. And speaking of, the Spirit card is almost exactly a month away, which means the clock is ticking for November and December. So
yeah, they gotta announce some plans soon. Which, by the way, also since we talked about Pereira before, Dana White recently did an interview on the Pat McAfee show, and basically Jones Pereira was brought up. Some fans have been clamoring for that after Pereira's performance at 303, and Dana White's response was just a resounding
no.
Yeah, it was just a resounding no. I'm trying to find a sound effect for it. Where's the buzzer sound? Oh, here it is.
Nope.
That's for it. Nope, not happening.
Do you believe in the potential theory that if Dana makes that fight, he's worried that his quote unquote dream of being the best pound for pound fighter in the world is going to die because Aspinall might win, and he doesn't want to see that?
I talked about it a few days, actually a couple, maybe even one day before that rankings came out after 303, and I said on here that I had ranked Alex Pereira above Jon Jones in the current pound for pound rankings. And that's the other thing. I think that's where we're getting off with this too, is that are we talking current pound for pound or all-time pound for pound? Because it seemed like in Dana's mind, there's pound per pound is all time, and there's no such thing as a current.
And I think that's where you and I more than likely agree. Currently, I don't rank him number one, but all time, there's no debate.
Once he won, now granted, what you think of the heavyweight title situation then, and what you think of Cyril Gane, when he won the heavyweight championship, it seemed to put a lock on it, unless you count out of the cage antics as part of your equation. I'm at the point, Zan, where it's like, if you count out of the cage stuff into equation, then your lock is GSP. If you don't, your lock is Jon Jones. That's where we're at this point.
Right. And as you know from my thoughts over a year ago and some other sensitive stuff, I like to separate the out of the cage stuff from the in the cage stuff, which is why I would rank Jones number one all time. So I don't know. I mean, I personally, I'm one of those people too that thinks that Jones doesn't even, in my opinion, Jones doesn't even have to fight Stipe, and people would
I agree with you.
Consider him the best pound for pound fighter in the world all time.
I agree with you. He could have hung up the gloves after beating Gane and claiming the championship. That would have put the UFC in a bad situation, but like you said, he would have locked himself as a GOAT at that point.
Right, and I think one of the bigger issues too, while we're still on this, is that people forget that Stipe Miocic is coming off of a loss. So it's like
a loss 3.5 years ago, Zan.
Right, a loss 3.5 years ago to a guy that we're going to talk about in a little bit, number one. And number two, if you really wanted to make it a legacy fight, you're making the fight 3 to 4 years too late. Just like Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao, it's the same. You probably agree. It's the same situation, just on the MMA side now.
Well, part of that is Stipe, and Zan. This goes back to when Stipe lost to Daniel Cormier. He will not accept anything less than a heavyweight title fight at this point.
No, right, 100%. And do you think on the day that this is airing, August 14th, that Jones Miocic happens? Yes or no?
Yes. Yes.
You do?
The UFC is trying to push it down people's throats, Zan. You know, when Dana gets this way, especially with the way he's acting right now with Jon Jones, he wants a certain thing happening. And at this point, it's going to be Jones Miocic. And he's going to expect Jones to finish him in the first round.
Are you picking Jones to beat Stipe if they fight? Yeah, me too.
And I am actually, just like I said before, I think first or second round, Jones is going to get Stipe out of there quick.
I think so too. I think a 3-year layoff is one thing, but number two, just not being a shell of your former self is way too difficult to come back from. And I think that's the situation that Stipe is in right now. Obviously, my Midwest bias would love to see Stipe Miocic pull a miracle, but it won't happen. So I just feel bad because the biggest loser in this whole thing are two people. Number one, the fans, and number two, Alex Pereira. Because you better believe if the UFC called Alex Pereira and asked to fight Jon Jones, he would take the fight. So
yeah. All right, quickly moving on. UFC Apex, no more. So apparently, UFC Apex is going to be undergoing some renovations. Dana White confirmed this actually in an interview with TNT Sports in the UK recently. It's going to be temporarily closed from November to some point during summer of 25, probably June, right before the Contender Series season for next year starts up. The last UFC Apex card is scheduled for right the week before Jones versus Stipe on November 9th. So happy birthday, me. I get an Apex card instead of UFC pay-per-view at Madison Square Garden.
Yeah, unfortunately.
and the rumored main event for that, because it would be UFC Vegas 100, is it might involve Henry.
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah, unfortunately, in front of no fans, which is really disappointing.
Well, look. The UFC Apex fight, empty arena, fight night, whatever you want to call them, has been a pretty bad draft. I mean, it has resulted in a couple of those, cards and where we think it's going to be sucky bad, and then it ends up being fantastic and entertaining.
And they're really good.
And then you have cards like
right, exactly.
And then you have cards like last weekend.
Snooze fest.
Which I want. I want the Men in Black tools, and the white. I want to forget that card ever happened.
I already have.
Zan, I'm already looking at that August 24th card, and like I said on Tough Enough, outside of those two Tough Finale fights, I already want to forget that card ever happened.
Oh, 100%, man. Yeah, I mean, my quick thoughts on the renovations are this. It's nice to see that the UFC is actually putting some investment time in the UFC Apex, and I know that might sound like an unpopular opinion, but if you mean to tell me that they're doing a $25 million renovation, that can only mean one thing. That's going to mean that more fans at a much higher price are going to be allowed to attend the shows, which means it's going to be 10 times more impossible to go.
Which means Apex cards forever, starting summer 2025.
Absolutely.
But that is going to Dana admitted this is going to force them on the road more now.
For sure, which means they'll be coming to territories they probably haven't been to in a long time. So
hopefully what's going to happen now? There's going to be, I think, a couple more fight night cards outside of the one I mentioned on the 9th. So what's going to happen there? What's going to happen to fight night cards in 2025?
Dana did confirm on McAfee earlier this week that Edmonton and China are part of the plans for Q4 of 2024.
The report I said before, it's actually Cole Shelton. Cole said Tampa's going to get its card December 14th. It's going to be the last card of the year.
Yep. So finally, it was supposed to be July 13th. It got moved to Denver, and now Tampa's getting their fight night. So good to see. I just think it'll be interesting to see when the Apex is finally done and the Apex comes back, how different it will look, or if it will look almost identically the same. So,
like also we talked about on Tough Enough, Zan, what's going to happen to a 33rd season of The Ultimate Fighter at this point?
It's going to be very interesting. They either try to keep it on the same schedule and they do it in a location we're not thinking about, or they just move the season to the fall instead of the spring. So
then you'd have Contender Series and Tough going at the same time.
I mean, given what the UFC has been able to pull off the last few years, I would say anything's possible, but that seems very difficult.
That's what I mean. It's going to be something to see. Let's flip back over to the PFL side for a bit, Zan. So, Muhammad Mokaev, in an update, he wrote on social media very recently just the word signed. That's it. We don't know where to. We have a couple of possibilities. But more importantly, Zan, over the weekend, he wrote a little bit of a thank you to several promotions and says, these guys reached out to me. I'm going to make my decision soon. I have this dream of going back to the UFC. And then Mike Kogan goes on social media and says, oh, PFL never contacted Mokaev, never had interest in Mokaev. It's that whole thing with Ray Cepho all over again. And again, like I mentioned last week, Zain, like Brett mentioned on his show last week, you talk about Ray Cepho, trainer at Extreme Couture, and who trains at Extreme Couture but Manel Kaif, who the whole situation with Mokaev that led to all of this. So, look, I don't know what to feel about the PFL. If it's true or not that they had any sort of contact or that they had any sort of interest in Mokaev, but I just felt, Zan, that tweet from over the weekend, not the one with just signed, but the one from over the weekend. I feel like that's a bad look where you're thanking all these promotions and saying you're going to make a decision, but ultimately saying, oh, my goal is like obviously the realistic is the goal is to get back to the UFC and win their championship. But when you're talking about, you're going to sign with PFL or Brave or One or Ryzen, is that the image you want to put on social media? Oh, I'm only using you as a stepping stone.
Yeah, that's probably not a good look, but also considering that he probably doesn't have the proper social media people around him to say, like, this is how you word something in this way, because I'm sure as he was tweeting it, he had a different interpretation than what the public thought. So obviously we're not in his head, so we don't know, but that could also be a possibility. So
this is leading me, Zan, to believe that maybe he'll go to a place that accepts the fact that maybe it is a little bit of a stepping stone to a bigger sphere, which means, Zan, the only places I can think of, Zan, are three: Brave, ACA, or One Championship, but One's kind of out because whatever, I don't know what they're doing with their MMA statuses at this point. They do more kickboxing and Muay Thai stuff now.
Then number 4 would be obviously potentially going back to the UFC if things get rectified, right?
Yes, but at this point, I don't know if it does, and I don't know if he has signed. This could be a clout move by Mokaev. This could be a tease for something, but yeah, at this point, I don't know if the UFC is interested in bringing him back. I don't know if Mokaev has an interest in. I don't know. Everything is just really weird with Mokaev. We've never seen. We have seen the public fights with the UFC and fighters, and we've seen it with Randy Couture. We've seen it with Francis Ngannou. But we've never seen it to the point where it's like this.
No, we haven't. And I think one of the most disappointing things about it is I'm sure that Mokaev, in his heart of hearts is a good person. And I'm sure also to the fact that he realized that he made some mistakes, but it's how he's going to go about handling them afterward. And if one of the lasting images that people remember of this guy is him tweeting stuff like that, thanking all these promotions for making it clear that the UFC is still the dream, then that's probably going to turn off all the promotions that may have spoke to him in the beginning, because they probably don't even want to deal with them anymore. So I don't know.
Yeah.
There's also the alternative route, which no one is talking about, which I'll bring up, is he could choose to become a professional boxer if he really wanted to. So
he would probably get booked on a Paul Brothers card or something like that.
I think he probably would. Yeah, I think he would.
It's a possibility. Speaking of Francis Ngannou, speaking of the PFL, they have confirmed an October 19th card. No location announced, though believed to be Saudi Arabia. The main event, Francis Ngannou finally making his PFL debut against Renan Ferreira, last year's heavyweight champion. Co-main event, finally we get Cyborg Pacheco. And there are going to be 2 fights in for the inaugural PFL Superfight Championships, which makes me feel like we're in UFC 1990s again.
No, it really does feel that way. I'm just going to put it to you straight. I'm excited for this Francis Renan Ferreira fight. 2 big monsters, 2 guys with huge knockout power. The big question is going to be, is Francis long layoff from MMA going to come back and bite him in the ass? I don't think so. I think he's motivated to go out and still show that he is one of the best heavyweights in the world, to prove that he is the best heavyweight outside of the UFC. And my early pick is Francis. What do you think?
Yeah, my early pick is Francis. I know Renan Ferreira is a killer, but we kind of referenced it before, Zan. Francis left the UFC having not been beaten for the heavyweight championship. If we're gonna go the lineal route, Zan, and his losses were in boxing, so if we're gonna go with the lineal route, technically he is still MMA's lineal heavyweight champion.
Right, and he had not lost in 3.5 years. So
yeah. I think Ferreira could definitely pull off a first round knockout, so I'm not going to completely write it off, but I will side with Francis. What about Cyborg Pacheco? Because Cyborg has come out before and basically accused, is this fight getting delayed so that way I get more rusty so they can have Pacheco win? Zan, despite that theory from Cyborg, I'm still going to pick Cyborg because, like we were kind of talking about.
I am too. I am too. I think she's genuinely pissed off at everyone, and this is her total FU moment to the entire world. That's what I think. What do you think?
Zan, in my mind, the only female MMA fighter that's better than Cris Cyborg is Amanda Nunes.
And Amanda Nunes is still in semi-retirement mode. So
you fully expect Amanda Nunes will come back?
Of course I do. Are you kidding me? If Kayla Harrison, if Juliana Pena, if Raquel Pennington are all still out there, 100%. 100%. And given that Saudi Arabia is in the picture with both the PFL and the UFC, a crossover fight at some point in the next few years will happen. In my opinion, it's got it. The money's too big.
Zen, if Kayla Harrison doesn't win the Bantamweight Championship or worse, gets upset in October, I see Dana going, complete old school, like boombox to the window, money bags everywhere to Amanda. Please come back.
No, 100%.
All right, but I'm excited for this PFL card.
I am too. If you were to guess, what do you think the pay-per-view price will be? And by the way, it's both on ESPN Plus and DAZN, which I find very interesting.
Oh, they're putting on DAZN too? Okay. Yep. I feel like both the 2 or 3 PFL pay-per-view cards we've had was what, $40 or $50?
Yeah, you think it'll be the same?
Probably around the same range.
Yeah.
Probably around the same range is my guess.
What do you think of them not combining this with the PFL Championship or for the finals? Because a lot of people thought that they could have made it a super card and had these 2 fights with the PFL Championships. Do you agree? Do you agree with the separation, or do you think it should have been one big card?
This is one, Sam, where I'm gonna have to.
Okay.
This is one I'm gonna have to. But there is a little bit of a development, Zan, on the day we're recording this. Another big fight just got added to this card. AJ McKee, Paul Hughes.
This is very, very interesting, considering that this is a major step up in competition for Paul Hughes. This is without a doubt the biggest name he'll ever compete against, and that one is that one is one that I think a lot of people are excited about, considering that there are a lot of people that have followed AJ McKee's career for a long time, and there's also the people like myself that are still getting used to the Paul Hughes hype train and his in him igniting Ireland and stuff. It's a very interesting fight. I'm excited. I'm excited to see it.
Absolutely. Let's go over a couple of boxing stories very quickly. So Jake Paul. And you kind of talked about this on your show, Zan, on Bando's Breakdowns. Jake Paul has teased that he wants to compete in the 2028 Olympics. Now, the catch is, it seems like boxing is off completely for the 2028 Olympics, which would just be yet another, example of the International Olympic Committee basically being like FU to combat sports, whether it's this, or the fact that they tried to take out wrestling a decade or so ago. It's just been a constant headache. Paul basically says he's tired of the U.S. team not coming home with gold medals, outside of Clarissa Shields. And he wants to see, he wants to make an impact. So he says, well, let's just do it in boxing. And Zan, on one hand, I want to say, look, technically he's a professional fighter, which means he can't compete in the Olympics. But given his status and given the fact that the NBA players get to participate in the Olympics. They just have the NHL players. They're going to, for the first time in 2026, participate in the Olympics. And I think they've been gone for the last 2 or 3.
Yeah, it's wild.
You've got the players on the Major League Baseball and National Football League level who are pushing to be involved in the Olympics in 28 in LA because they're going to have baseball and softball there, and they're going to have flag football. So, given that circumstance, it's like, why not?
Right. But I think if Jake Paul competes in the Olympics, it's going to make people hate him even more.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. I'm not a complete fan of it. And like I said, he's technically already a professional. But, and you kind of talked about on Bando's breakdown, Sam. The money, the viewership that will be placed on with Jake Paul.
I also think too, now that I'm thinking about it, this could be another situation where they drop the ball, and it's like when Caitlin Clark wasn't invited to the women's basketball team. So
yeah, I mean,
now granted, those are two totally different scenarios. It would make more sense if Canelo was interested in competing in the Olympics, considering he's the best boxer on the planet. But I don't know. Well, Jake Paul would seem like low-hanging fruit, but obviously, what do we know? Number one, and if the IOC is going to keep going down this route, then Jake Paul won't be competing in the Olympics at all. So,
yeah. Speaking of the IOC, let's quickly just talk about a little update because this had happened after Pat and I recorded last week's episode, but we weren't able to get in time into last week's episode because of editing and scheduling and such. But the IBA actually gave a counter to the IOC for everything we talked about last week. The IOC claiming they didn't know about the drug test and basically the test results nullified and everything. Yeah, they had a really big press conference, and basically it was really glitchy. It started an hour late, and basically it was just a complete farce, and it was a complete, just out of control. I'll take just this here, Zain, from Sky Sports, that basically several journalists and other people who were attending left in disgust, and not just the language, but the tone of the answers of the IBA.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but there was a journalist who even admitted out loud that this is taking way too long.
Yeah.
That's how frustrated they were becoming with it.
Made comments about Thomas Bach, the IOC president, talking about the IBA president Umar Kremlev, who was speaking virtually in Russian, interjecting, the portrayal of Christianity during the Olympics opening ceremony and the controversy there. And it was just completely out of control. Kremlev interjected. I mean, Zain, but you know what? This controversy's over. I think Kremlev, or whatever name was, won the gold medal there. And guess what? The Olympics are over. People will find something else to outrage over. So this is no longer going to be a story.
That's true. I mean, this would be a bigger story, in my opinion, if this was happening in real. I'm not saying the Olympics are in real, but this would be a bigger story, I think,
on the professional scene.
Yes, 100%. You took the
on
word
the professional scene, yeah.
100%. You took the words right out of my mouth. But yeah, I agree. This is no longer a story, considering that the Olympics are over and the situation has been amended the best it possibly could. So,
but you know what? Let's talk about something going on in the professional scene, Sam, because we talked about last week, well, Pat and I, and then you on your show, about the Canelo and Crawford stuff. Well, apparently Canelo and Turkai Al-Sheikh are kind of beefing with one another.
Yeah, this is interesting. As Dana likes to call him, Sheikh Turkey is getting into the shady side of things here a little bit.
The worst nickname I think I've ever heard.
I know.
But yeah, apparently Canelo, basically was not a fan of how Turkai Al-Sheikh does business. Turkai basically fired off statements on social media and saying basically he doesn't like how Canelo does business. He says Canelo's taking easy fights, and he's saying, oh, Canelo's avoiding a Crawford fight, and I only want to make the big fights, etc., etc. It seems like maybe he doesn't like the fact that Canelo, we kind of referenced it before, Zain, has his 2 times of the year that he fights, Mexican Independence Day weekend and Cinco de Mayo. And yeah, it's just complete. These two are beefing, and look, I get that they're beefing. I get how they don't like how each other does business, but if Turkai is trying to promote the biggest and best fights out there, you got to have a guy like Canelo Alvarez on your side.
No, I agree. But maybe Turkey thinks, oh, I have all this money, I can just make other big fights. That could also be another counter,
which is true.
That he's probably thinking about. But
which is true.
But when you have the number one pound for pound best boxer on the planet in your grasp, and you two can't come to a potential deal, that's a bit of a problem. So
yeah, it's a real big concern. Something will get worked out. Like Canelo will get past Belleriga on September 14th, and then I don't know if the Crawford fight will be next, but they definitely are going to have something in the work. We had I'd
like to see the winner of Bivol versus Beterbiev fight the winner of Canelo versus Berlanga. That would be interesting.
Yeah, definitely. What I was going on was about how very recently in the last year or so we've had Canelo versus Munguia. So the Canelo has made big fights before with the 2 times he fights in a year, and actually Bivol and Bitriev, that's a really good fight. Honestly, that could be next, especially considering Zain. Bivol has beaten Canelo.
Yep. Yeah, so there's already a story there. And that's a fight that a lot of people thought should have been an immediate rematch and never happened.
It never happened, yeah. So it'll be interesting to see there. And by the way, Zain, just very quickly, during those statements, he did drop a little hint that it does seem like Fury Usyk 2 is going to happen December 21st.
I'm very, very excited to hear that, considering what we just spoke of the UFC's plans. Great way to end the 2024 fight schedule. Are you excited? Because I am. That's for sure.
Oh yeah, Zain, I'm gonna be starting. I'm gonna be starting my holiday break at that point, and the first thing I'll be doing is watching. Football coming to the near of its playoffs. College football will be at the playoffs at that point,
right?
And then watching heavyweight championship rematch action. That nothing better.
Oh, for sure, and it's something that I can't wait for as well. And 100%, 100%, that is going to be one of the biggest heavyweight fights of the entire year. And I actually think it has a chance to exceed expectations of the first one. It might actually even be better. So I'm very excited for it. I just can't wait for the official announcement and the official post, because I know that Top Rank is going to cook up something that looks unbelievable. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, one last thing here, because like I said, I don't give a rat's ass about last weekend's card, but I will give Sergey Spivak credit, because I did not expect, the fight went to the ground, but I did not expect that Sergey Spivak was going to pull off an armbar submission with Tybura on his belly, extend it the way that he did, and get a verbal tap.
Yeah, I mean, this was definitely a shocking finish, a fight that I thought was going to go the full 25 minutes, and I was wrong in this prediction. But Spivak looks like a stud, and he's definitely still in the heavyweight mix, and it at least put a positive end to a card that just wasn't very good. But it's good to see that Spivak, came back after a year away off and looked the best I've ever seen him. And for Tybura, it's just back to the drawing board. He'll still be in the mix, but it's one of those fights where you just couldn't afford to lose at that particular point in time, just given the current state of the heavyweight division. That's all you can really say. So
yeah, but also, by the way, in 2 slick armbar finishes in the span of a few days, first round armbar finishes. This and the most recent episode of The Ultimate Fighter.
Unreal. Absolutely unreal.
It's armbar central. Ronda Rousey would be proud.
For sure.
All right. That's going to do it for us here for this edition of the MMA Outsiders. Hit that like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/ETV Network. Help us continue our climb to 1,000 subscribers. Make sure to follow us across social media at MMA Outsiders ETB, and follow the network at ETV Network, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok. Again, go to etvpodcast.com for more information. And then, of course, listen to the MMA Outsiders wherever you get your podcasts. Shout out to our friends over at Playback. Like I said, we'll finalize the time, but either 11 or 11:30 on playback.tv/ETV Network. It's Fight Study. for UFC 305.
Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to that, and very much looking forward to all of the content that we're going to keep putting out here on the network and on Playback over the next several weeks. So with that being said, for Tom MCN, please enjoy UFC 305 this weekend and all of the different combat sports that are taking place over the next week or so. And just wanted to quickly remind you guys before we get out of here to be Joe Piper.
Be Joe Piper. All right. We'll see you next week, everyone.
Have a good one.